Hi guys, welcome to our podcast. This is Yes and No podcast with Matt and Arda. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
Peachy.
Peachy. Are you taking a drink already? Like you're
No.
drinking, like the moment I'm asking you how you're doing and you're like, let me take 2 seconds.
I love drinking
Okay.
coffee specifically. Do you still drink coffee?
I don't drink coffee.
No. Are you a beta?
Am I better? I'm just drinking coffee just, to seduce women. That's what I'm doing.
So we're talking about toxic masculinity today. That's gonna be the topic, and
Wow.
I feel like there are a lot of things to talk about. So this is something that we come back to time with Matt when we are having our daily conversations, and we have pretty much similar take on it. But time to time, I think we diverge and we have different takes on things, especially with the alpha male pop culture situation.
Okay, what is an alpha male? All right. To the people that don't know what is alpha male, all right. Because there's different aspects to toxic masculinity, and I think we're going to try to cover a lot of those. There's like politically in terms of relationship, as you said, but also in terms of the culture and patriarchy system that we're living in. But it's also, definitely this trend going on for a few years regarding alpha male or red pill,
Alpha male?
kind of trend.
I would start with the understanding of many people what alpha is, and it's coming from more of like nature and animal packs, and there's definitely some misunderstanding aspects of that because a lot of people think it's like this dominancy in that pack, but you can also take it as a leadership. And in some packs, the leader is not necessarily the dominant one. It's just a part of the pack, and they kind of treat each other, equally. But there might be some guiding figure in that pack, and that leader figure, I would consider that as more like alpha. But the most of the times in the culture, it's like the dominant, showing some strength, and that translate to when we're talking about alpha male. Men should be strong. Men shouldn't be weak. We should be behaving in a way that you show confidence, and that maybe translate to leading in a relationship, because in the masculine and feminine dynamics, there's this take that the man should lead, man should open the door, man should pay the food, men should provide. And alpha male talking points are around this, especially on social media and those types that I mentioned who are trying to give advice to other men. So that's my take. What do you think?
So, of course, alpha male is definitely, coming from alpha, the dominant caste in some way. But what is interesting is it started like a few years ago, I would say, during the beginning of social media, and not the beginning really, but like a few years after, like maybe 2010, something like that. You had a lot of guy, coming online, being like frustrated with the relationship with women, with feminism and all that. And there's this cast or trend that started up about like, okay, how to be a man, a real man, And it just spread out on the internet. Exactly, it spread out like in social media and online with different current. I would say there's definitely this alpha male red pill idea, and then we're gonna go further into like how does it look like that right now. And there's also this other part which was more alt-right propaganda, 4chan, incel, basically, which guys were frustrated with women and basically started to be like, okay, let's have solidarity between men, and then we can rise up, against women, feminism, and all that. So there's like there's two current to that. There's like this first one, and then there's the second one. And the one that we're talking about when we're saying alpha male is definitely a new current that goes actually back to one of our previous episodes about the grinding culture. So I think It's not just, confronting women and saying like women are bad and we are male and we should dominate the society. But there's a little bit of aspect to that, but there's also this other aspect about productivity, thriving in their life, in their work, in society, and you need to follow some rules and to prove that men's are worth more because they can bring more stuff in society than women. And you can definitely see that like a lot on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, and all that. And I bet everybody, who's listening or watching definitely saw at one point a video, with this huge logo with the lion on it or something like that, motivational, video about, yeah, if you wake up at 5 a.m. and you don't care about women perspective, you can definitely, be the best person on earth or something like that. And that current, like, really started a few years ago, I would say. Like this first part that I was talking about alt-right and incel, involuntary celibacy, something like that, was more, hidden online back in the YouTube era and all that. There's a lot of connection with some psychologists or mainstream popular, people, that kind of bring those ideology in maybe in politics too. But the alpha male theory, we can say, really started because of that idea of grind culture that we talked about in the previous episode, which is you need to be the best for everything. And through that means you need to impose your dominance as a man, because what makes you strong is just the fact that you're born a man. And this then goes into society and how we treat people. And I think that's, basically what it is.
All right. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah. All right. Don't forget to follow us on social media. All right. It was a race on the podcast. No. But what I'm intrigued is the whole question about this trend going on is it inherent to ourselves, to social media, or to society and where we're coming from? Like, there's definitely this extreme, aspect to being alpha male and toxic masculinity that goes with it. I don't think treating women like shit because you're a man and because you think that you're strong because you're a man is something great. But there is something more subtle that you can maybe find in society. I know that in France, and I bet in Turkey, and you can explain it a little bit more, how men and women, are like the dynamics between those two, and how men, most of the time are having problematic relationship with women.
Can you also tell me, before I go there, I want to talk about something else.
Okay.
There is this concept that a lot of people are not either familiar with or don't use to in day-to-day conversation, how they describe things and communicate things. There's this, it's called intersubjectivity. All right. We use subjectivity, we use objectivity, and as subjectivity, our personal experience. Intersubjectivity defines a group of people's subjective experiences, matches, and then it becomes a collective subjective thing. Intersubjectivity is something that is very much related to these type of alpha male and toxic masculinity too. And if you look at like cultures like Turkey, for example, it stems from religion. It stems from old traditions a lot, like how men behaved in a society and how women behaved in a society. And that as an intersubjective thing has negative sides to it, because a lot of times, many times, people got into these cultural things or religious expectations or cultural expectations from men, and they don't really think about it or try to understand, like, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because it's kind of like you normalize it. So, for example, if a man beats their woman, their wife, that might be fine. That might be like, well, a man sometimes it's a woman, blah, 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 blah. Like, there are definitely men in Turkey, in some other Muslim cultures. I'm not saying like generally, it's not most of the men, but you can find those men justifying it. Being the person who works. Women, raise the kids. I'm gonna work. When I come back home, I want food at my table, and my wife to take care of me and be nice to me, or whatever the expectation is. So what I'm trying to say is those toxic masculinities may come in a form that culture or religion can sometimes normalize it, and people normalize it, and they don't even see it as a toxic thing. So that's one aspect to it. I don't know if there's what's your take on it?
I mean, I totally agree for that. I think the biggest idea about toxic masculinity is the Eden one. Like, people that don't realize that a toxic behavior, because of the person's genre, right, which is usually a cis male, white, and the way he's gonna be, acting and is gonna be interacting with other people is toxic, because it's part of the culture in some sense. But to relate one of your point, I think there is definitely a part that is related to religion, and maybe Turkey, it's more traditional, that idea regarding specific behavior that you can have toward women. In France, it's the same, but I would say it's a little bit different too. We normalized in our society in France relationship with women, but I would say we sexualize them definitely more. So I think there's this idea of, the one that you can see online about like girls, in bikini and big butt, and, guys, they are like, yeah, I'm super powerful and all that. This alpha male that you can see maybe sometimes online, there's these two aspects. There's like this guy trying to motivate you because you're strong and you're a man. But there's also like, look, if you behave like that, you're going to have a lot of bitches, around you. Sure, there's that. But in France, I would say it's different. It's still the same, but it's different because there's something intellectual behind that behavior. Like, we accept in France as society that people that are important, political people, artists and musician, actors, I would say more actors actually, especially right now, nowadays, did sometimes behave in a way that is definitely not appropriate. And it's usually connected to sexuality. And
actually, it's the other way around in Turkey.
Yeah. And it's, inherent in our, culture idea of how to make a movie. All right. Like, we have these huge things going on right now with Depardieu. All right. Depardieu is like these huge actors from France. And it was like, he's still super famous, but he was really famous in the 80s, 90s. He was making those super strong
Yeah,
movies.
my mother loved him. Didn't he piss in a plane or something?
I think he pissed in a plane. And he has like
that was the last straw. Like, I was like, I'm done with that guy.
Yeah, and you see, like, he's super famous, like, around. And there was like this documentary that aired on TV a few weeks ago, and you seeing him in North Korea for whatever reason, because I think he has also Russian citizenship nowadays, so to not pay any taxes, whatever. There's so many things wrong with it. But then there was this huge drawback, because during this documentary, he was talking about, woman that he was seeing in front of him. He was seeing like a girl on a horse, and he was like, I bet that girl is having pleasure because of her clitoris is fucking rubbing on the saddle of the horse. And that shocked a lot of people in France. And it also has like a lot of rape accusation, right? And then that shocked a lot of people. But then there were still people justifying what he was saying and what he was telling. So even the fucking president, right? Macron said,
shit.
He's not judged yet, so we're not, gonna judge him. But the big problem there is behind all of that is this idea that there's no problem behind it, because it just, just say that, and he was, not doing it. It's just like this idea of treating women in this certain way is just comedy. and that's it. And I think there's this huge rooted problem in our culture in France regarding all of that. Like if you see Gainsbourg, right? In the 60s, he was almost touching ass of women, on TV, live on TV. And people were like, yeah, that's just his character, he's such a cool guy. And there's like so many people like that in France. And a lot of people accepted that idea. Like, yeah, if you're a man with power, then you can do whatever the fuck you want. And it's definitely, not rooted in the same Christian or maybe Muslim identity regarding religion. But there's
Are we
this idea
transitioning
of,
to Me Too?
it is definitely Me Too. Like that's what
Yeah,
people are
that's
trying to
also-
do right now. But the idea was really about that. It was not just Me Too in terms of what it represented in the movie industry and those behavior regarding power moves toward women to gain success or something like that. But it was definitely something that was recurrent every single day on TV, and people were accepting those behaviors. They were accepting that because in the idea of the collective mind in France, like men, if they have power and if they're really good, then women don't really, have anything to say. And
So they are basically using sexuality to be dominant, to be controlling over women in some sense.
I think
Like
there's-
that yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I think there's two aspects to that. There's definitely that first aspect to it, but there's also a way of normalizing relationship
Yeah.
in that sense. I know some people that
And
think
yeah, go
that
on.
those behavior were cool. Those
Yeah,
behavior
I mean,
were
as
cool.
you said, it's actually a method almost to have that control and power over someone. You need to normalize it. You need to make it look like it's okay so you can keep doing it. And in Turkey, it's kind of like the other way around. It's not that you sexualize women in the sense of like, if anybody wears whatever they want or they're like, it's other way around. It's like they don't want that. They want women not to express themselves with their sexuality. So they suppress that side in the sense of like, no, like you're a whore, you're a slut, you're a bitch. More in the sense of like you need to wear appropriately. Like if you're in a family setting or if you're even going out, you shouldn't wear certain things. Now in Turkey, it might be a little bit different. There's like a little bit more space for that. I was in 90s or early 2000. I felt that was a more of a thing. Maybe slowly we transitioned out from that, but that was the one way that men was like dominating or controlling women. Don't wear that. You can see that in relationships too. Don't wear that. Why are you wearing that thing? Are you exposing yourself to other men? Like, what's the point of putting that much makeup? Those kind of things. That's coming from an insecurity, but that's also coming from culture and a normalized thing because that's the right thing to do. That's okay. Like, and that's an aspect of a toxic masculinity in a cultural setting that's stemming from certain cultural norms.
Yeah, I mean, even in France, don't get me wrong. If you had someone that is gonna wear a certain type of clothes, even in France, there's like so many terms to say that person. Like one of them is like bimbo, meaning like it's not a whore, but it's this girl, showing her boobs or ass, and she's trying to get power over men because of that. And there's going to be a lot of people going to judge her the same way as you were saying, like, well, you shouldn't wear that, you shouldn't wear this. And it's going to be from both sides. It's going to be from even women who are going to judge that. And
Yeah.
I don't know where it's coming from. You said for you, it's maybe religion. Maybe it is still in France, but
I mean, I would say you can even say politics, certain economical, like family structures, like how people traditionally going back, there was like the family was really important, community was really important. So in those settings, I think traditions determine certain things, and religion is an aspect of that. Like people people's morals coming from religion most of the times. Like what's
Yes,
right and wrong comes from that.
Yeah, but not to sidetrack too much. I think it goes to also the fact that toxic masculinity is not something that is only male oriented in that sense, in terms of it's part of society. Like, I think toxic masculinity is a way for people to accept as a general collective some behaviors that are actually pushed by men. Like, yeah, we're living in a patriarchal society that inherently, goes to create some toxic behaviors. I was shocked to discover and to hear about. There's this guy making a podcast, and the podcast is really great, and you should check it out. It's called
What is it called?
Pop Culture Detective. All right. So he's basically trying to tackle some media, I would say, movies or film or music genre and stuff like that, and trying to put a perspective in terms of how it affects us socially and where it's coming from socially. And he made an episode about movies and toxic masculinity in some sense, saying that we value as a collective, we love some movies that are based on behaviors that are definitely not correct from men. And he was relating those different movies from the 60s until the 2000s, where you have, and that shocked me because like there was this example exactly, which was really interesting for me. It's like this idea of, sometimes in movies you have this dynamic between a woman and a young guy, and he's trying to be in love with her, and he's searching, his own sexuality and his own, way to communicate with women. And sometimes, you're seeing that girl's on the other side, on the other building, and she's undressing, and the guy's like peeping, behind the curtains, opening the window, just looking at her. And then you see her, getting naked. And he was explaining that this is problematic behavior because we're teaching, even in the movie, 100%. As a kid, you're going to watch that and you're going to be like, this is normal behavior. As a young man, to find yourself and to find your own sexuality, you need to go through that idea that you should watch women, undressing and not respecting boundaries and objectifying women, but also not respecting the boundaries of their private identity or what they want to do, because that's normal. And where it goes even further is saying like, sure, that scene where you can see the woman stripping, on the other side of the building and the guy watching and peeping through the curtains, sure, that is behavior. That behavior is not good and is definitely toxic. But also the guy who actually is filming, the director of those movies, is actually doing the same thing, because the reality is like, you're on set, you're putting a woman, you're asking her, even if it's in the script, to get naked, and you're going to film that woman getting naked. All right. So you're going to have the same point of view and perspective as what you want to recreate in some sense. And that is
may
also
I add
toxic.
something? May I add something here? So this is actually very interesting, because like the Hollywood effect actually is something that we can talk about, that I think maybe starting from like 40s, 50s, moving forward, there are like so many movies that has a certain archetypical man, and that archetype of man or woman, it's actually very influential, like globally in some sense, and it's coming from America, right? But also like films in general has this thing, when you write a script, especially in Hollywood, the character starts in a bad place. They behave in a bad way. And then you see a character change. And that character change is very important. So at the end, they either become a better person, they learn something, and that change gives the audience that the hope, or the that they can change too. So they use that method a lot. The character has to change. Therefore, when we see men or women behaving in a certain sense, I kind of try to, when I watch the movies, I know that. Like, I see at the beginning if they're behaving in a shitty way, I'm like, okay, this is bad behavior anyways. Like, this is going to probably change along the way. But I don't know if many people know that, or I don't know if many people watch movies in that sense. Or
I don't think so.
They take in that characters like, oh, this is an aspect of a character and it's fine, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what is normalized in society too. Is it's okay. It's part of growing up. It's part of, the small quirks that makes you interesting, And this is toxic behavior, because the moment you don't respect the other person on the other end, then you're becoming toxic for sure. But I think it's also related to this construct about how society was perceived already back in the 50s. This idea that, sure, you can see in 2000 some movies that are showing boobs, and guys peeping or through a webcam or something like that. Maybe, American Pie as an example, all right? But it also goes back to this core ideology, as you were saying earlier, about the family structure too, right? Which, if we have to refer that, goes back to the 50s. The guy is working at the factory, all right? The woman stayed home. She do the dishes. She's taking care of the kids, all right? And this was promoted by, I think, something more political in general. So I think, sure, there's this idea of, emancipation from artists that want to share that through films and all that. But I think it's also based on our, not core values based on religion, as we were saying before, but also as a political system that we're trying to create genre, definition of how a man should be and behave and how a woman should be and behave. And that toxicity, is created in between to try to connect this core value of the family, idea that we have maybe created in the 50s,
I think there is something interesting there. So if you would look at it from the economical point of view, and if you look at American capitalism and neoliberal capitalism, I think in the 50s, how they structured it was, let's focus on the family. Let's focus on community, Christianity. And not only that those are good things, but we're having a society that man would go to work, woman would be in the house, raising the kids, making the food, taking care of the house, and then men produce. And that's great. Like, it looks stable. We can create these archetypes and we create these roles. And it's good. For the economy, it's good. For the structure of the society, it's predictable. It's a foundation. It relates to Christian values. All right. Mm-hmm. But then slowly, I think closer to 90s, when capitalism, that neoliberal capitalism, grows so much and the global economy, global trade peaks. Like 90s are where you see Nike everywhere, McDonald's all over the world. Like that's like the peak of capitalism, right? Mm-hmm. I think they started to promote individualism a lot more because you would like to involve women into the market and workforce. You would like to have men because you need labor. And if you have individualistic wants and if you can create needs for those individuals, you can sell more stuff. You can create more products. And I think they transitioned from that because that model of family and community plateaued at some point. And they slowly, I think, realized individualism involving women into the labor and making every individual have their own wants and needs. We can sell more. We can profit more. And I think we had a transition from there with the internet, especially. And I think that archetype of 50s and 60s changed a lot. So and I think that's a driving force too, I think, behind the curtain.
So yeah, that's where I'm going. Do you think then, since the power structure changed a little bit through that because women were more involved in society, in they had more rights, first of all, in the 50s. Do you think that's where this ideology of toxic, masculinity started to rise because of this?
I think it created different type of toxic masculinities around it. And I think women are still going through which we can actually, if we will talk about feminine, toxic femininity, I would love to have someone in the podcast too, a woman's perspective, right? That would be great. Because I don't know if we can really say much about it, but I think in general sense, as much as toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, we have like new variations of it. And that's why we're having these culture wars in some sense too. I mean, it's probably accelerated. There are probably more, but there's also, I think, more variety of it. So I don't know if it's more, or I would say there's more variety than toxic masculinity is a lot more. Maybe it is a lot more. I'm not sure. What do you think?
I mean, the thing is, what shocked me was actually 2 years ago. I think it was 20, maybe 19. There was this huge commercial coming out, maybe during the Super Bowl, maybe before, from Gillette, right? Gillette, the razor blade maker, right? And there was this advertising about actually toxic masculinity. So it was this commercial on TV explaining that usually, Gillette is for men and it's great for men and you're men. And they wanted to change this. They wanted to change the talking point, saying like, we don't have to be men and toxic at the same time. You can be a man that is not toxic and you can still shave and everything is fine. And in between the commercial, there was like this display of different behavior that men were used to do, which is like doing the barbecue, and hanging up, with their beer, cheering and, screaming at things, looking at women in a bad way, or judging them, while they are walking the street. And they were like showing those behaviors, saying like, if you're a man, you don't have to behave like that, to be a man. And this sparkle, this huge phenomena online against feminism, saying that this commercial was too woke and we're imposing this vision of society and men were going to be like devalued because what is it something that is really that bad? And there was like such a backlash that people started to boycott Gillette, and it was crazy. It was insane, because it was a reflection on, at the same time it worked because there was a mirror or a reflection of how men were behaving most of the time, generalizing this idea. Okay, nowadays, maybe it's not the 50s, but the guy, they go to the bar, they watch their game, on TV, and then they do barbecue because that's the man role to take care of the meat, grilling on the barbecue and all those things, saying like, okay, that doesn't make you a good person or a man just to act tough or be following those codes. And that was a huge, huge backlash back then.
Yeah, man. I don't know. There are so many things. There are so many varieties. You were talking about incels, for example.
Yeah.
That's to me an interesting reaction, especially online reaction. Mm-hmm. That you start getting these men who are very frustrated with not getting girls. Like they want to go out there and be with someone, and looks like they're failing, or they're like something is going on in their life. Maybe besides this, something is going on in their life, but they're having a hard time. And the reaction is, I'm gonna go to the internet and I'm gonna say shit about women. It's like, this is definitely a toxic behavior. Like, why are you
toxic? Right. But I think it even goes like even further than that. It goes to this idea that they cannot get girls or women because the power dynamic changed, because they are expecting women to behave a certain way, and because they're not doing it, that's the reason why they are singles and then frustrated.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, sure, there's this idea of power dynamics and those guys that are frustrated, that don't like some behavior regarding women. But there's also something that you can find in general men behavior. There's this video that I saw a few weeks ago. And for me, it is insane. And I think it relates also to this idea of media and power and being strong. It's how men are behaving watching a football game, soccer or football, American football. It doesn't matter. There's this idea of, you will see in this video, you see that, I don't know, someone from the other team mark a point, and the guy just go fucking crazy.
Loses his shit.
He loses his shit and punch the TV and be like, fuck that shit. Like, it's fucking crazy and fucking nuts. And I think there's an interesting aspect to that idea, because it is normalized, because sometimes we're like, well, boys will be boys, and if they behave like that, it's normal.
Hooliganism, man. In Turkey, I don't know France, but hooligans were like, that's one of the reasons I stopped watching soccer. Like, it's so toxic in terms of like how they fucking not only normalize, but they fucking, I don't remember anybody killed anybody, but they hospitalize. Like, they beat each other, they stab each other. Like, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why are you guys, what's going on there? It's just so fucked up. But it's like, it's not directed to women, is it? Could be.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the video that I've seen. It's there's this aspect about violence that is inherent to men and their masculinity. All right, that goes
because if we go there, I have another toxic masculinity for you. That
all right.
War.
Go ahead. War. Yeah, we can go even further than that. But there's definitely that this idea that men's are more violent. All right. And it is okay. Like you're saying, war, that is something embedded in patriarchal society. Men will go to war to prove that their balls are bigger than the other one.
Yeah, it was a big part of it. Even, like historically.
Yeah.
That was
today.
Glory to war.
Yeah. And there's, as you say, there's glory. And then even
it's
romanticized. Today, there's women romanticize that aspect about men violence, because it proves that man is strong and powerful, that he can, support everything and he can defend you. So there's that aspect. But in the video, it was turning back around. And he was showing those guys losing it, and punching the TVs, going fucking crazy. And the guy was telling you, if he's doing that and you start, your relationship with that person, at one point, it's not going to be the TV.
Yeah.
Meaning it's going to be you, the next person, you're going to be punched. And allowing guys to behave this way right from the beginning, it is also problematic, because it definitely can turn really bad. So there's this aspect, but it's also rooted to two things. One is definitely the psychology of why men are behaving like that. Yeah. Right. Why are they toxic inherently? Because when we're talking about toxicity, I don't think it goes about like being just a macho. I think it is related to deeply rooted in ourselves. Why are we okay to behave like that, since we know we are doing bad things? Like when we're behaving, like we're destroying a TV and then it's going to be the wife, like obviously none of those are good. Like even punching a TV and breaking something because you have violence in yourself, but it's normalized as it's a man, trait. Yeah. That is toxic. That is bad. But then, so there's that first aspect, and there's the second aspect that it goes into the relationship, because there's this second idea of first psychology, but also normalize into the dynamics of the relationship with someone else.
Yeah, men are more violent. Even the primary violence towards men, it's coming from men too, as much as women are getting that too. So I don't know, like it's just historically so interesting to see this just like very clear.
But don't you think, so one of the things people actually says a lot of time is they're restraining their emotion, like you have two things. Women are emotional because they know how to express it, and men, keep them to themselves. So they don't express their emotion, because you should, be straight in your head, in your mind, and focus on the thing. And because of that emotion, goes too much out. And then the expression of that emotion sometimes is violence. Right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I hate most, I would, you can talk about it, but is this idea that, it's like that because, our ancestors is like this and we are behaving like that when, we were living in caves. Come on, it's been 80,000 years, all right, since the human race exists. I think we built so many things. We wrote so many things. We went to space. We had like this energy to come up with new ideas all the time and to reflect on ourselves. So I think this idea of, it's just testosterone, and that's why men are behaving violently. I think it's just completely bullshit.
I mean, this is my take on it. I agree on you if someone says that this is just coming from testosterone or the testosterone is the cause. Then I agree with you. But ignoring testosterone by in itself is just, I can give you an example why it's still relevant. Like, think about it from psychology. Like, psychologically, you have a lot of things that you can teach yourself, you can learn. There are mechanisms, there are social constructs. Like, there are a lot of aspects that you can change, but there are also neurological things that you cannot change. And you need to include that into your evaluation of your psychology. So when we are looking at men, there are definitely a huge amount of like intersubjective against subjective, the experience they're going in, the social constructs, the politics, the economy. Like, there are like a lot of things that men can do to improve certain behaviors. But I don't know, at least when I look at it, there is different neurological and chemical processes that kind of makes it relevant to that conversation too, I think. I know you don't agree to it, but I think
I don't agree at all.
Yeah.
Of course. I think there's toxicity is the result of a certain behavior. And you would say because of fact that are coming from our anatomy or who we are
as biology,
body, as a human, biology, right?
Yeah.
We behave that way.
Not necessarily like it's an aspect, I'm saying.
It's an aspect, you'd say. I don't think it's an aspect. I think every single day you follow rules while driving, while doing anything. That doesn't make you go fucking crazy. That doesn't make you someone toxic when you're going to engage with others, because there are rules that are established by society, but also by government, and there's law, right? So I don't think that just because those hormones, touch you and trickle you sometimes, it automatically will make you act a certain way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Not just because of that. Yes.
So I think we can even restrain ourselves to not behave in that certain way, even if this was the case, even if it was a small part of it. I don't think that is as important to make you really behave like that anyway. So you have like Jordan Peterson that is going to tell you that, oh yeah, we're coming from the lobster or some shit like that. Yeah, fuck that guy. Fuck you, like you're someone that can think by yourself, that can do their own research, that knows that if you're acting a certain way, you punch a fucking TV, you need to replace that fucking TV, and that's not normal. Like, the TV doesn't break by itself. If you broke it, you're just being a fucking dick, and internally that you should not break the TV, all right?
I'm seeing some emotions coming out, Matt.
Yeah, but then the emotion,
what are you doing,
I don't think those...
Down, my friend.
I'm a man, and I'm super toxic, guys. No, but it's for me, I don't think it's legit to say, oh, this behavior is created because men are like that and women are like this. They behave a certain way. And it is the easy way out to say, okay, I think there's something definitely rooted in our society about how we expect men to behave, how we were expecting men to engage in our society, maybe in terms of capitalism, maybe in terms of their work, in their family structure. There's this idea that at one point, we need to have this reflection about yourself, about like, okay, I'm saying that to one person, that person is not going to appreciate what I'm saying right now. And it's not going to be by the fist that I'm going to tell that person what to do. I think that's not what general humans are doing. I think you can take the time, think about it, think about yourself, why you're having those emotions. Sometimes it's something is going to trigger you, but from a point of view, there's definitely psychology, that goes in it, why we're acting like that. But there's also this self-reflection that you need to understand about how to behave normally with someone else. And
how many people do you think do that?
90%? No, I don't know why.
You think so?
No,
you think majority of people doing that self-reflection?
Of course not. I'm kidding. It's just like bringing some bullshit data like fucking podcasts are doing.
If you check the data.
Yeah, if you check the data, 90%. Yeah, of course.
That's actually one of the things frustrates me when I watch those alpha male talking points.
Yeah.
Like they always use this sociological, I guess, some kind of research. If you look at the data of this and that, and I always in my mind I go like, is it true? Like, where are you getting this? Like, what's going on right now? I've never heard this before, and but even my brain like goes tricked into it. Like, really? But then I need to go make my own research and blah blah. And it's just like so frustrating that they are throwing that at you, and I'm like, God damn it.
But I think those are relevant in the self-reflection that we have also as dynamics in a couple, in a relationship. Because sure, we're talking about, okay, psychologically, men's are maybe more emotional and they don't express their emotion too well. But as I said, for me, it's not inherent to your biology. It's not inherent to just psychology, you know. It goes also to understand the world and the reality that you're living in. And the dynamic that you're going to have, for example, in a relationship, you should know how to behave as a normal person in a relationship. And I think one of those toxic traits about masculinity is this idea that men, they grow up, they go to college, they party, they drink beer, they do their own shit, they do the barbecue, and then they come home and they don't do shit. All right. It goes back to this maybe idea of 50s. But let's say it's not even that. Like, I think today we maybe past, you know, that dynamism, but it's still interesting to see that a lot of people, I mean, especially men, I would say, they don't know how to do the dishes. They don't know how to start a washing machine or something like that to do the laundry. They don't know how to do it. And they're like, you know, it's your job as a woman then to do it because I don't know how to do it. And like, there's a lot of videos online, you know, right now going on. There's those trends, you know, that are asking men, you know, okay, if I'm asking you to do some
clean this ketchup on the counter.
Ketchup on the counter, right? What are you doing? You know, or I want to do tacos or nachos tonight. All right, and I'm putting something in the grocery, but I didn't mention one of them because I forgot about it. Are you buying the chips or not? And I think that goes to say that men, also the expectation that you have in a relationship, but some men are incapable of doing things. And I think it goes in two sides. And I think in the conversation that we're going to have about toxic femininity, it also goes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think that's toxic masculinity or toxic femininity in that case?
I think there's both of it. But still, the dynamics that I want to mention is some men, they don't know how to behave generally inside the relationship. When people are a couple and then they move in together, and then there is this expectation, maybe for sure. But I think it's in the relationship that, okay, you're going to do the chores in general, like, okay, cleaning this because you ate this or doing that. But there's a lot of men, and I'm not part of it, but for me, it shocked me to see that there's
I can give you my experience because I was one of them.
Okay, go ahead then. Give me your example as a toxic male.
I mean, if I first of all, I don't think it's like so it's learned, right? It's a toxic behavior, especially if you are in a relationship that doesn't have those dynamics of man and woman. And you were referring to these videos, for example. If you look at those people, they're probably, and it's an assumption, but coming from more traditional setting of a family. Maybe they are Christians. Maybe they have normalized that men, they don't know it. Women take care of the house, raise the kids, but I want my husband to help me out. So I'm going to tell him or whatever, right? So my experience in Turkey when I was growing up until maybe 20, 25, 26, I didn't do any house things. Like if you go to certain cultures, the mothers literally don't want you to. Like you can go and say like, I'll do this, but they're so like, that's how they are seeing it. Like the house, like, and it's a conditioning too. It's probably, we should go back to how they are raised, right? They don't let you, they take care of everything. And you end up doing none of those things. Like if any skill, anything that you need to practice to get better at, I never had that space to learn. And now, you know, when you get into a relationship, like you start to realize that fuck, like we're not living in that times anymore, right? It's definitely, and also once you start reflecting, it just doesn't make sense too. Like why I don't know these stuff, like why I don't know taking care of myself. Like if I live alone, why I don't know all of those things. So you start to build from there to learn, right? But to people who didn't grow up in that type of an environment, they're like shocked in the sense of like, how you don't know how to start a washing machine. I didn't know how to start a washing machine until like 20 something, 22, 24 or something. And it's frustrating because I worked on sets. I can, you know, set up a professional camera and actually manually fix everything. If I'm in the military, when I was in the military, you can dismantle a gun and put it together. That's fine. But I can't fucking start a laundry machine. It's just so frustrating. You also like, am I putting white separately or it's fine? Like, is this color white? Is it considered white? There are like some logos on it. Like it's just gonna, you know, mess up the whites. So you just don't use. And that learning process as you're 22, 24, it's just weird. But I go through that. And it reflected some of my relationships. And it didn't reflected some other relationships because my partners were also normalized that. And they also okay to have some kind of, I guess, control from the female perspective, but in the setting of a house. But I believe that's coming from how you are raised. And sometimes it also comes from like you get too comfortable and then you're like normalize it and then you use it in your own benefit.
That's interesting. And
I was being very vulnerable here. I just opened up.
Okay. I'm okay with you. You're fine. Okay, you're in the safe place.
Thank you. I learned a lot.
Guys, please don't trash Arda in the comments.
Okay, thank you guys. I mean, hopefully.
But like for me, that's not my experience at all, for example.
Yeah.
I've been raised in the woman environment. My parents divorced, and I didn't have like a father figure for a lot of times. And even though my mom got remarried or something like that, she had a boyfriend for so many years. I wasn't like not allowed to do some stuff. I was not encouraged to do it either because I think it comes from, as you say, something more generational. But the idea for me was like, okay, I need to do it by myself. I want to do something, I do it by myself because I want to be capable of behaving and acting in a way that I can do whatever the fuck I want and some kind of freedom to it. Like, for example, my sister doesn't know how to do some part of the laundry. She doesn't know how to iron stuff.
Still? Or back then?
Still. And she's almost 40, right? And I'm not judging. I'm not saying it's bad. But I'm saying like for me, like it's not like maybe it goes to laziness, as you say, you know, more comfortable in some way. So I got raised in the same household as her. But for me, I was like, okay, one day I needed to do it. And I was 14 and was like, okay, how to do it. And I started to do it. I'm starting to try it. What for me, I don't understand with what you're saying. I mean, I understand it. Don't get me wrong. But it's like, don't you think it's also inherent to who we are? Because you could, even if your mother was not letting you to do some of the dishes or some of that or the laundry or something, at any moment you ask yourself being like, okay, if I want to do it, how do I do it? And then you just, come in at 25 and be like, okay, how this shit works. Like when you're not interesting to be acting as a normal human person that is free of any constraint and being able to do whatever the fuck they want.
No, obviously it wasn't normal, because I don't know if you want to put it on my not being curious, not wanting to learn those aspects of it. But when I was thinking those moments, that any intent that I go into, I want to cook something, I want to clean this area, I want to do my laundries today or wash the dishes today, I was messing it up. I was not getting it. I was doing mistakes. And at the moment I did something wrong, my mother was like, okay, I leave it to me. Like I'll do it. Just don't worry about it. It's fine, right? Because I was also getting into her space maybe, but the way that I was doing sometimes some things, that she was like, it's okay, like don't do it. And there's a point that after repeating and repeating and repeating certain things, I was like, like I'm not gonna do it. Like, it's just, I wasn't really in my mind pushing it in terms of like, I'm going to do those things. I don't know why. I tried a few times and it's not, it's hard to figure it out, but it's also not I'm not let to do it. So there's a point I'm like, all right, then I won't do it. And then you get used to it. And then you stop asking that anyways. So it's not that it didn't happen. It happened time to time. But there was a point that you get, I guess I get into that comfort zone that I have been told not to multiple times. It also brings that like, am I doing this wrong? Like, what am I doing? Am I doing this wrong? Maybe I shouldn't do it. Or that kind of a, yeah, go ahead.
But isn't it like actually what we're taught as men is like trying to be successful, trying to be the best? Like if we look at sports in general,
yeah, I mean not everything.
Beat, that's the thing. Like you want to beat, the other team. If you're gonna be a manager or successful in your job, you need to push forward. If someone disrespects you outside, then you need to. But also you need to recognize.
Growing up, you're also told to like that's a woman's job. Or that's not a man's job too. I think there was that aspect to it too. Because even though I tried time to time, I think it was coming more from a place of I would like to help, kind of a, not that I want to learn this. And I think it might be mostly stemming from because was that the question that, well, why wasn't I curious about learning about those things more, right? It might be coming from that aspect too, like that archetype, like man doesn't do it. And you look at other men and they don't do it. And when you do it, then it's like, it's a woman, maybe. I don't specifically remember examples, but the example of so in the society was that. So it might be a big reason too. It's normalized. It's not a man's job. And on the other side, it's also a women's job. So that's women are conditioned that way too.
But then
again. Huh?
But then you face the reality in relationship when you saw that,
and things were changing too.
Exactly,
things were changing. Like if I were born in 1950s, 1940s, it was going to be the way it is, anyways. Yeah. I wasn't going to learn. I would probably married with someone who knows house stuff, and it should be it. Maybe not. I don't know. Like if I look my uncles, for example. It's kind of like that, but they do those things too, to a degree compared to other men in Turkey. Like they cook, they're actually very interested in cooking. They do cleaning and laundry. Like my uncle, he loves cooking. But yeah, I don't know. There are probably multiple things about my own experience, but my mother, my own getting into a comfort zone. The culture, testosterone, like testosterone is probably the main reason, man.
I don't know. Maybe I don't have testosterone.
No, just kidding. You don't have testosterone.
Who knows?
You
can check me on YouTube. You'll see.
But yeah, that's my I think we spent too much time on this, but
no, I think it goes actually to how it is represented nowadays, because You can be.
I mean,
a
to me,
toxic
this
man.
is least toxic thing men does. To be honest,
So what is it then? What is the most toxic behavior that men can have?
like manipulating, psychologically manipulating, physical violence, kind of putting shame onto to not only women but anyone, like even LGBTQ, like how alpha male approach that is to me is like very disgusting. But there are like so many other aspects, like how people treating each other simply.
But that's the thing. So you just said it. Don't you think this is normal human?
Yeah, but in a
behavior?
setting that a woman and a man accepts those archetypical roles, it is still, I think, something that needs to be talked about. But it's not as toxic as a man shaming a woman, a man manipulating a woman,
But then
or
you
other
see
men
that-
too.
Yeah, but that's the basic of what you're saying. It's like always a man doing this to a woman, a man doing that to another woman. Maybe between men too. But there is like this idea of man versus man is okay, you know,
No.
and man versus woman doesn't really exist. Because for me, like toxic masculinity, you can be toxic. All right, I can do, I don't know, something in my backyard, bitch on woman, being like, fuck the world, fuck Gillette, all right, and their shitty razors or some shit like that. Yeah, this is behavior, toxic behavior, masculinity, because you're proud of being a man in that, and your identity is related to that pride regarding who you are as a man, all right? But I think the moment it goes to affect another person, another human being, then that's where it really shows off. And I think nowadays, this toxic masculinity idea is not about like this identity or representation of men, who they are, how should they behave, and what they're doing. I think it's actually the dynamics between women and men. It's inside the relationship of this idea, because we're so entangled in this identity of men being a certain way, and sometimes they are expected to change, and they don't want to change that because it's part of who they are, not just a cultural, ideology that live through, but as you say, maybe testosterone or something like that. And their reaction is meaning there's no self-reflection of who they are, and they cannot pass their own pride, and that is influencing someone else's life directly.
I mean, I think as long as you're honest to others and honest to yourself, and there are agreed upon things, and if you're not harming anyone, it's fine. Like, I don't care if people agreed on. Yeah. Like, but in that setting, a man may not do any house things, and a woman would prefer to do those things. That setting can be healthy environment for some people, and can be very toxic for others. So in itself, I think it's not necessarily.
But do you think it's a choice?
Could be. That's what I'm saying. But historically, no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then, okay, I'm going to ask the last question then.
Okay.
Where do you think we go from there? Where are we going? How can we change things for men not being that toxic? Because
non-toxic masculinity.
Exactly, because not toxic. Yeah. I mean, everybody can be toxic, sure.
Yeah.
But how can we change this paradigm where men behave a certain way because their identity is related to their genre, basically?
I think one of the important thing is for men to understand first themselves, who they are as a person, not necessarily trying to recognize these archetypes and how you should behave in a society. They should, I think, break that down and realize that these are those intersubjective things that they don't have to submit to. And that starts from looking inside. And then from going out and try to understand how they're going to exist in the world. I think a lot of men should try to understand the woman gaze a little bit more, a female, women going through this, or even like everybody else. Like, it doesn't have to be women too. It can be other men. And if you go to gender and sexual orientations, the LGBTQ. So I think from there, first starting from themselves and working on themselves, being aware, being kind, and then try to understand other people's perspective. Now, this sounds like just generally being a good person.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is actually that too. And that I think manifests that healthy masculinity, I think.
But don't you think there is a collective responsibility too, in terms of our culture, the way we
100%.
portray men and stuff like that? Because the
100%.
reality is like we're still constrained into this patriarchal society that it based some identity toward men based on stereotypes too. You can still watch TV, think, for example, on in the morning, and you'll see the toys, that are sold for the kids. Sure, you're gonna have maybe sometimes guy, behind cookware for children, but most of the time it's the same thing. It's like war and get strong with this huge truck and ride, over the mountain with it, something like that, remote control. And then the woman is going to be like, hey, let's have a good hairdresser salon, with my girlfriends. And it's going to be fun. So this still embedded deeply in our society and our cultural identity, I would say. And don't you think this should be changed then? Like, because
100%. But I think that starts from within more than. Like you need to start working on yourself and recognizing how popular culture uses these tools, or you can even say capitalism in some sense, like companies trying to profit and using these archetypical things to sell people. But it starts from within. I think you need to start with yourself, and then also try to acknowledge that there are lots of constructs and social norms that you need to evaluate and see it as, like, it doesn't have to be who you are. You don't need to fit in those boxes. And I think it starts from there. I don't know. What do you think?
I have another take on it. I think this should be changed globally first, for allowing individuals to look in themselves. Because the reality is, if we still portray main behavior in a certain way in media, in whatever it is, all right? It could be advertising, it could be politics, it could be films, it could be whatever you want. We still reinforce this idea of how men are structured in our day-to-day life and in our society. And if we don't show that, then for them as an individual, I think the work in itself to deconstruct our own identity and our own behavior is definitely more complicated.
So who are the people who are doing those things then? You said that there are like some global things. Who are doing it? Some people are creating those contents, right? They're like
but then there should be a collective acknowledgement, first of all. There's a problem.
But in order to have a collective acknowledgement, I think you need to personally acknowledge it first.
I don't
like
think so.
you want it to come from outside, but what I'm saying, like, if you don't start individually and kind of spread that, other individuals needs to do that, and then you get something collective. But you cannot just expect it's magically gonna happen. Then you still need to convince other people, and those people should be still look into themselves and work for. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think your point of view is actually pretty cis-male, hetero, normalized. What you're just saying right now.
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying.
Let me finish.
If you're saying that,
let me finish.
Because it's nothing to do with cis-male.
Yes, it is.
100%.
Because what the point that you're making is, it should come from someone individual to try to change that. And what you're just missing, I think.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's not.
I know, but what you're missing is the idea that you forget that the people who are gonna put that in perspective are not just men. It should come as men individually to change those behavior, but the reflection and what you're gonna see in media is just not men. It's just not. There's like people that are trans. You're gonna have LGBTQ. You're gonna have women. You gotta have a lot of people, in those in those contexts, that can also reflect on your own behavior. And I think if we are having this debate right now and this conversation, I think it's because at one point, I don't think it's self-reflection regarding men behavior. I think it's because you have those exterior, point of view from women and other people that actually trying to be like, hey, look, this is not normal behavior. And this conversation in itself and why we are having that, and I think how we can change things is not just as an individual, as men, we should, try to look back in ourselves and then express that to others. I think, first of all, we need to listen and hear what other point of view are saying about us. And this comes from something exterior, so not inner to ourselves. I think, people in the media, advertising company, I don't think is, maybe most of them are still managed by men, but I don't think it's just men. So I think we should hear, first of all, about other perspective to try to then express those different opinion more. And then from those opinions that are diverse, then maybe people are going to see something and be like, okay, let me think about my behavior as a man and why I might be toxic in those behaviors. So I think it should come from.
So do you think because I totally agree with you that there should be, of course, different voices be in that ecosystem to create content and kind of break those archetypical things. So there should be more women, there should be more LGBT. Sure. But do you think a man who doesn't look inside, and they're like men, right? Do you think they would see it?
At one point, I think
you will just polarize it even more. They would react to it, and they would be
like about Gillette. Huh? That's what you're saying. Like you're saying, like,
I mean, there are some people Gillette, probably would be okay with the Gillette commercial.
But the Gillette is actually, saying that toxic
No,
masculinity.
what I'm saying is even those men who look at those content and say like, well, actually, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Need to be kind of do some self-reflection. They should be capable of doing that.
I agree. But what I'm saying is not that. I'm not saying like as the Gillette, actually, you're pointing out something inherent to the identity of the person that you're facing. But I think, as something more settled on a daily basis, because we consume media, we consume social media, we consume, images, photos, and all that. And if we're still shown stereotype idea of what a man is, then nothing will change because the self-reflection is not there. There's no point to start the conversation in yourself saying like, well, actually, I just saw that, but that is problematic. Like, for example, I'm doing motorcycle, right? And on my Instagram, like, because I looked twice at a motorcycle video, I have shit tons of video, like photos of motorcycle, and it's always this man, like super manly, the beard, and this leather jacket and all that, and he's looking at the camera like, hey, what's up, girl? Okay, that's the only thing I'm going to consume then. Where is my own reflection about like, okay, this behavior of this image of that guy that I'm seeing is actually something that is not good because I don't have any other perspective. I don't have any point of view in front of me to reflect on myself saying, well, that's not something correct. I'm not saying like, well, this behavior is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying the more diverse the messages or the reflection regarding how the dynamism of our society is working, the more men will be confronted to themselves and to the normality that we want to change as male identity. And then at that point, maybe the self-reflection will start. But in itself, the way the society is built in, it's just reaffirming some toxic traits, some toxic ideology. When you see the fucking TV and you're watching a football game and the guy's losing it, there's nothing saying, well, this is bad behavior. You're just seeing another guy behaving like a dick.
No, you can't. You can see people around that person may get like, this is a bad behavior, but do you think that they will accept it? Like, just because you put something on the TV that says, oh, this is actually a bad behavior, it's just going to fix that person?
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like, we're still
this sounds like we are doing yes or no podcast. This is a yes and no podcast, my friend.
I think it's both. I agree with you 100%. It should come from yourself. My behavior and why I'm behaving.
And I agree with you too. I think there are like two aspects that's very relevant.
And the difference, there is between you and me is because there's some stuff in ourselves that we're conditioned, differently. I agree with that. So I'm not judging you or saying like you're a bad person because you didn't do the dishes until you were 25. All right. But I'm saying that if there's nothing in front of you to confront you to your own self, then there's no change, because you were saying
100%.
You were confronted at a certain age to this reality being like, you are expected to also do this, to do the chores, to do that. And then you ask yourself, okay, then maybe where I was living or how I was living before was not normal. And then I need to change some aspect to myself, some behaviors, some trait about yourself. So I think the triggers should start from something that allows you to reflect on yourself. Self-reflection, if it goes from yourself, great. I don't think a lot of people have the capacity. I think 90% of the people don't have the capacity to do it. And it goes to men or women in general, maybe even more men, because we talked about psychology and how, it is something that is not well regarded for men in general. But I would say there should be a trigger. And this trigger could start by allowing others to get another perspective. And from that perspective, maybe it's going to reflect to yourself and be like, okay, maybe that's not normal what I'm doing. And I need to reflect on that. And how can I be different? And how can I behave or act differently?
I hate when we fight.
Well, good. You're starting communicating. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay. I mean, yeah.
There you go. All right, guys. Just to follow up with that, there's so many things we should have talked or we could have talked about toxicity, because behaviors are so dependent of their social context, social structure. You can say this is toxic, this is not toxic. People are going to watch, for example, an MMA, or UFC fight, and they're going to be like, well, it's just fights, it's just normal. But maybe there's self-reflection to do about like, why do you need to put men, fighting each other until they bleed or break their bones in a cage? Yeah, it's just bad representation of what a man is, because men can have emotion, men can cry, men can love, do laundry, or taking care of the gardens and plants. No, yeah, and I think there's so many things to talk about that. I think there's this power dynamics in society, in politics, and inside the relationship. And that goes also to what we started to talk about. I think there should be also a conversation regarding toxic femininity, in terms of not feminism, but toxic femininity, because there's this fringe ideology that goes nowadays into that same power dynamics, which is, I'm a woman, I'm like that, and I'm expecting a man in front of me to behave a certain way. And hopefully we can have this conversation soon, guys. And as Arda is saying, it would be great to have a woman perspective on it in the podcast. We'll see, who we can bring in that conversation.
Yeah, we'll start having the application soon. So.
Start the application soon. Yeah, go online, all right? And then take a picture of yourself, because we want to judge first, because we're not. No, it's
probably
joke, right,
one
guys?
of our friends, I would assume.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But I think those are conversation that we're having right now is actually maybe the beginning for some of the people that are listening or watching to think about their own position in this world, in this reality, and how maybe we can change a little bit some of our behaviors to be more easygoing with others in general.
Yeah.
So there we are. Hopefully you like that episode. Don't forget, you can follow us on every social media at yesandnopodcast. You can watch this replay on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. You can leave some messages on our socials. All right, we're on Thread and Instagram, and hopefully we'll see you or can listen to us in our next episode. I was one of your hosts, Matt, and this was my good friend, Arda.
All right. Thank you for listening us, and we'll see you next episode.
See you in the next episode. Bye.